The volunteer culture of Lutheran Social Services of the Southwest means that we can't function without volunteers. It means that we are volunteer infused, and we depend on volunteers, and we're here for volunteers to have an opportunity for them to make a meaningful contribution in this great work of refugee resettlement.
I think that working in a volunteer culture is working in a place that values you and understands that you are bringing the gift of your time and your talent, your energy to further the mission of the organization. You know, we often refer to staff and volunteers, but the reality is that we have paid staff and unpaid staff, because we are just as dependent on the volunteers who come. They're an integral part of the work, and so that culture is one that values everyone's contribution, not just the people who work here, but the people who choose to come and give their time.
I came to the United States as a refugee in 1997, and right after that, maybe just 2 to 3 months, I began working for Lutheran Social Services of the Southwest for Refugee and Resettlement Program. So it's been about 21 years now. 21 years, yeah. We have been able to resettle around 25,000 refugees since 1982. So thinking about almost a small town of refugees working together with LRS was resettled in Phoenix.
Our volunteer culture is predicated on the belief that our unpaid staff is just as important as our paid staff. And so we manage them in the same way.
That's the only difference between them. And so when you think of a volunteer program like that, you value everyone's ideas, you look at people from the same perspective, and it allows you to take into consideration things that you might not have otherwise, to include volunteers in staff meetings, to include volunteers at decision-making levels. And so that is why, as a director of volunteers, I often work hand in hand with the director of human resources, and we make sure that different policies and procedures are in alignment when it comes into the way that we do things.
We manage them really the same way we manage our paid staff. We regard them as they're unpaid employees, but they're part of our organization. And we really work on, with all of our staff, positivity, gratitude, a deep sense of purpose in what we do.
I do feel their gratitude. And like many organizations that are providing services to the less fortunate, I know they are understaffed, and I know everyone has a lot of work to do, but I do feel appreciated because they do take the time to talk to me and to meet the needs of the students and to meet my needs, to meet the students' needs.
Volunteers can be instructors, they can teach cultural orientation, they can teach life skills classes with an ESL focus, they help in our sewing room, in our computer room, they assist in taking people on a one-on-one basis, what we call a first friend, as a mentor role. They actually will introduce them to the places that they love in Phoenix, help them ride the bus, help them navigate grocery stores and how to get around town. So there's things that happen outside of our office as well. Our volunteers will assist with donation drives, with sorting donations once they come in, administrative tasks, clerical of all kinds with different staff members. The list goes on and on.
So the childcare is important because oftentimes women will be worried about who's going to watch their children, and so that can highly affect attendance at these classes. So it's very helpful because they know that they can leave their children in a place that they know is safe, and they know that their child is being well taken care of while they have these opportunities to better themselves and learn skills. And it's good for the children as well, because it also provides them a space where they can also meet other young kids who also experience similar things.
So having diversified volunteer positions to choose from is one of the best things that you can do for your volunteer program, because then you can attract people from all different walks of life. So people that may work Monday through Friday, but they really want to volunteer and they're only available on Saturdays. People that love working with children, or people that would love to work with paperwork and moving donations around.
Our volunteers represent the community. Refugees can't resettle without community support. There is no resettlement without community support. And so that's the very important presence of the community in the agency work is represented by volunteers. We can't do it without them. It's not possible. It's not that we don't have the ability or the energy or the money or the time. It's that it's not possible to resettle refugees without the community involvement, because it's the community that they're resettling into. And so the community needs to be involved in it for it to be effective and long-lasting, sustainable, real.
Position descriptions, any volunteer manager will tell you, is one of the most important first steps before recruiting for a volunteer, because that really sets the foundation for what your volunteer is going to be asked to do. We put them in a position that they care about and that we think that they do really well in, instead of just taking every person that applies and matching them as soon as they apply to just anything that's open.
When we want to ask a volunteer to come and work with us, before we ever put a person to work, we identify and describe what it is that they'll do. And we don't want volunteers to come and just fill a gap. We want that gap to be clearly identified and clearly described so that we have a position waiting for that right person to come and fill it.
I think that placements that happen out of scarcity may not last in the long run. The more work you can do up front to find the right person for the right fitting volunteer role, the better it'll be for your whole volunteer program. For the volunteer, for the staff, for the client. If you have a successful volunteer program, then program staff and your volunteers will actually recruit when they're out in the community on their weekends, when they're interacting with their family and friends, just because they love what they do. So if you have a volunteer program that your own volunteers are proud of and they're recruiting for you, it's really amazing. Onboarding always starts with the volunteer services team. So typically someone will reach out and tell us that they're interested in volunteering. So they will apply. And then once that person has applied, a member of the volunteer services team, that may be a paid or an unpaid individual. So volunteers are on our volunteer services team and they conduct interviews. And the interviews are usually over the phone, and they're just to gauge the interest of the volunteer and make sure they're a fit before they commit to coming into one of our offices physically. So the phone interviews last about 10 to 15 minutes, and we have a list of questions that we ask every volunteer, so it's the same from person to person. And then if everything checks out and they seem like they'll be a good fit and they are interested in one of the positions we have available, we'll invite them to our volunteer orientation. And that's an hour and a half. We go over all of the Lutheran Social Services programs. We talk to them about different policies and procedures of the volunteer program in general. And hopefully by the end of that, presentation where we go over all of the positions, they've nailed down which position they'd really like to go after.
So when a volunteer is ready to come to the agency, they'll meet with me, and I will share with them Refugee 101. And I'll train them about what a refugee is and how they've come to be a refugee and what their experience is coming over to America. And then I'll also give them a cultural sensitivity training. When I'm finished with my training, then I'll walk the volunteer downstairs to our volunteer coordinator, and we will check the person in and give them a name badge and introduce them to the Better Impact system where they track their volunteer hours.
If you have access to Better Impact, it would be definitely worth learning the different features and implementing that database into your volunteer program, because it's essential that when you have a volunteer program, you have some way to track the information. Tracking is hugely important for funders. They will want to see how many volunteers are active, how many volunteer hours are being served, the value of those volunteer hours. So really, if you're going to have a successful volunteer program, you need a database that can track all of that information. Plus, it just holds all of your contact information of your volunteers, and it's really necessary to be able to get a hold of them, keep track of notes of different efforts that each of the volunteers is working on.
I think the most important skill that we help volunteers develop is cultural sensitivity, and also would be trauma-informed care. So many of our refugees have experienced trauma, and it's important to understand, especially if you're in a teaching role, how trauma works in a person. So we provide training initially, and then we provide quarterly professional development.
We offer quarterly professional training for our volunteers, and it's on a variety of subjects. And so we usually will choose something that we think the mentor volunteers or the instructor volunteers that are interacting on a regular basis with our refugees would really benefit from. And actually this month it's on trauma-informed care. So we will choose a topic and a guest speaker and have them come in, and then usually we offer some type of potluck or dinner that we provide, so that it's a social component as well as a chance for them to learn something new.
I think that there's opportunity with the organization to be able to go further. You know, organizations have a tendency to be focused on resources, and there's never enough. And so we think about, well, you know, we can only do this much. This is all we have for our resources. This is all we can do. But when we can harness that heart, a volunteer not only brings themselves, they often bring their entire network with them. And I have witnessed volunteers who have opened doors for additional resources in many ways, whether it's funding or people or spaces or in-kind items. You know, they bring their entire network of people, their families, their friends, their workplaces, and so it multiplies. And if we can harness a volunteer's heart, we can receive so much more than just that one volunteer job that we're looking to fill.
So there's something amazing about volunteers, because they are people who have a very specific drive because they see something that needs to be changed in the community. And they know they have the talent and the time to make that change personally. And even if they don't really have the time, they're going to make the time. So every day I get to talk with people who see those needs in their community and match them with ways they can actually fulfill those changes, those ideas, those, take their actions and actually make change in the community. So it's a wonderful gift to be able to work with volunteers, to be able to match them. And that's why I love what I do. But to be able to do it with a volunteer means that they are coming out of a place solely to make positive change because they care about it. These are not people that are sitting at home and have nothing to do. These are people that are living very busy lives that are making time to volunteer because they care about the city that they live in. So why volunteers? Because they're amazing, because they care, and because they see a need that needs to be fulfilled, and they know that they're the ones that are going to step up and do it.
It is just such an incredible gift for the organization, for the people who are served. And I think it's just also creates that, that wave of love, that wave of energy that, just lifts the entire atmosphere for us. So I would say to every one of them, thank you. Thank you for your gift of time, for your love, for your energy, for your vision to believe that you can make a difference, because you do.